Dear ladies and gentlemen, first time in Latvia, we'll have a unique discussion with world-known critic Andy Hayler, who's been to all 3-star Michelin restaurants around the world, and our Latvian chefs. The moderator of this discussion will be Svetlana Riškova, president of Baltic Culinary Federation. Andy Hayler, as a critic from United Kingdom. Kaspars Jansons, chef of restaurant Mūsu. Māris Jansons, chef from restaurant Bibliotēka Nr.1. And Lauris Aleksejevs, chef from restaurant 36 Line. Please enjoy and are ready to give some questions and ask our guests as well. Enjoy.
So, hello, Andy. We are really happy to see you in Latvia. We were happy when we discovered that you will come. And yesterday we all heard your information, your perfect presentation about the Michelin guide and everything what you prepared for us. But today we will try to make it a little bit informal, to speak and to ask questions, and we expect you to open a little bit more this theme for us, because we chefs who are on the stage, we work at least 20 years in this industry, and we knew something. Yesterday we discovered something more. And we are all thinking about this, and maybe one day. So, of course, the biggest question for everybody who is here and who is in Riga and in Latvia, when? That's right. Yeah. That's the question. Yeah. Well, of course, not so straight, but we really want to understand what Michelin thinks about our region. We really thought before you came that it's mostly important to have a good level of economics and tourism level, the percentage of growing of this, etc. So is it really necessary to have those things, or it is more about culinary, or it is both, or how it is?
Hi there. So I don't have really the answers to that, because Michelin are extremely secretive about what they do. What I can say is that you can look at history and how they've changed their coverage, and it's clear that Michelin run their guide not as a sort of a charitable thing, but they try to at least not lose too much money on their guides. And so one of the things that influences their choice is the likely sales of their guide. So, for example, a few years ago they tried to do a guide to Las Vegas, and they did that for 2 years, and basically nobody bought it, or hardly anybody, and they actually killed that guide after 2 years. In other places they've opened up new guides recently to Shanghai, to Seoul in South Korea, and to more and more places in Japan. And I think it's interesting because the reason they're doing so much in Japan, it's partly that the restaurants are very good, which they are, but it's also partly that a lot of people are buying their guides. So they sold out of their print run of their Japanese guide, almost within like a day. So therefore it's in their interest to sort of cover more of Japan, because they can see some commercial success. So although only Michelin can really answer the question, it seems clear that there seems to be a sort of a mixture of somewhere that has sufficient restaurants to be of interest, but also somewhere where they can see that people will probably buy a decent number of their guides. So as to what that means for the Baltic states, I truly don't know. Essentially they do. The Michelin have these different country guides for, say, France and Italy and Germany, and then they cover other parts of Europe in a thing called the Main Cities of Europe guide, and that doesn't cover everything, but it does cover a few big cities. So it covers Athens, it covers Prague, it covers Budapest, covers actually Warsaw and Krakow. So they have gradually extended the coverage to certain cities, but as to exactly how they decide which places to add, you know, it's a mystery known only to Michelin. So they're a very secretive organisation. You could say that their motto is probably a bit like that of Coco Chanel, you know, which was never explain and never apologise, and it's a bit like that with them.
Okay, so we will still hope that they will come here. Then I had a question yesterday. I heard your presentation and I started to think about expenses. So mostly nowadays I think that mostly people are looking for the internet version, not for buying a guide, as I think, because me also, I checked in internet, I never tried to find somewhere to buy the guide. So all those expenses, the salaries and the bills and traveling expenses, probably there are also, by the way, are the all inspectors from the region, from the same region, or they are traveling to different regions? How it is?
Again, you know, Michelin are very secretive, but my understanding from various interviews that they have given, where there is a country guide, they usually have a team of local inspectors that they recruit. So in, let's say, Italy, there will be a bunch of Italian people who are inspectors. In Japan, they've got a team of, I think they say there's about 10 Japanese inspectors, plus one French guy. However, for newer guides, my understanding is that they often sort of send inspectors from nearby countries. So, for example, for the Scandinavia guide, I think that's substantially covered by some UK inspectors. And I'm not exactly sure if they've actually yet recruited any local Scandinavian inspectors. Yeah, you're absolutely right that it's clear that the sales of the print guides are clearly going down, because that's true of almost all guidebooks, because there's so much competition now from the internet, and if you're only interested in looking up the stars, you can just go on a website, because it's not like Michelin write lots of prose, you know, lots of words about the places. They don't have any words, they just have, you know, the address and some symbols, whether it's got a star or not. So to some extent, that format is very susceptible to to competition from the internet. I mean, clearly, you know, Michelin still, you know, are happy to, you know, continue to fund their guides, because they see it, as I understand it, as a kind of marketing expense, because the Michelin Corporation is obviously a huge company, and although they lose apparently about 15 million euros a year because of all the expenses of the travel of the inspectors and salaries, they regard that as a sort of an acceptable expense, essentially, because of the impact on the broader Michelin brand. So this is all information. I don't have any secret information about Michelin. This is all information that's I've just followed their interviews, you know, from there's a guy called Michelin, who is the director internationally, and he occasionally gives interviews, and so this is all information that, you know, you could all find. But as to the detail of their internal plans, I have absolutely, I mean, I have personally no connection whatsoever to Michelin, so I'm simply following the press here.
Probably if this marketing could be not so expensive, the products of Michelin company could be cheaper, because budget is budget, right? Revenue is revenue. So I thought about that yesterday after the election. Yeah, that's interesting. So I also had a question about the new restaurants. I was, my experience, I was, I think 2 years ago in Madrid. And we went to the restaurant, which was just 2 months after opening, and they already had a star. How it is possible, a new restaurant to have a star? That's really strange for me.
That is curious. I suppose a lot of it's to do with timing. If you take, for example, the UK guide, it comes out these days at roughly the end of September. They will have to have printed that in probably July, because it's going to take time to print and distribute to the shops. And so they will have to have finished their inspections no later than June, let's say, about 3 months leeway. So it is, I suppose if you time your restaurant perfectly, you can just squeeze into the inspection season. But
They were just lucky.
They were just lucky, yeah. Otherwise, they would have to wait, another year. And that again is a kind of an issue with all of the print guides, because they're always sort of a year out of date. Not a year out of date, but you understand they're at least several months out of date because of the delay of doing that. Whereas obviously if somebody posts a review on TripAdvisor, it's up there the next day. So that's a problem that all the print guides face.
And one more question, what I wanted to ask you, really important for the chefs, I think. So many restaurants have a Michelin star in different countries. I was also, for example, in Chicago. In one restaurant, we worked there for 2 days to make a preparation for one event. And when I went to that restaurant, I imagined that I will see a new brand kitchen. Everything is new and so nice and so many stuff and etc., etc. But actually the kitchen was not very clean and not very new equipment, and something was broken. And I thought then that guests are coming now more about our country, because our kitchens I know quite well, what is happening under the wall, so there on the other part. So everything in the restaurant is very nice and nice service, and everything is plates and etc. But in the kitchen sometimes it's not so nice, and some of those restaurants still have a star. So how do you think, is it fair, and what is your opinion about this?
Again, I'm only repeating what I've read, but what Michelin say is that certainly at the 1-star and the 2-star level, the only criteria they use is the food that arrives in the dining room. So they're not inspecting the kitchen. They're not health inspectors,
Yeah, I know, but still,
Yeah, so they're just diners essentially. So they dine anonymously. I think on occasion they do introduce themselves at the end of a meal, but if they do that, then that inspector will never go back to that restaurant again in order to not be recognised.
Okay.
But in terms of whether the equipment in the kitchen is old or new or modern or it doesn't matter, because as long as they're producing good food, the Michelin inspector wouldn't know really what the equipment was like. They're just diners.
But still, the Michelin make advice for the guests to go to that restaurant, which is maybe not, what I mean.
But if the food is still good, even if the equipment is a bit old, the quality of a food is not proportional to how new the cooker is or the oven is. You may have a slightly old oven, but that doesn't mean that the chef can't cook.
Yeah, but it is also about hygiene, about all the ingredients of that.
But again, think about it. The Michelin are not at all doing any kind of health inspection type thing. They're not seeing the kitchen. They wouldn't ever see in the kitchen, I don't think, from my understanding. There will be people in America who will have. There will be a health inspector who will go and check on the hygiene and all this, but that's nothing to do with Michelin. Yeah? Michelin are just diners.
Yeah, that's what we spoke about, Lauris, old world and new world, right? Maybe Lauris can ask a little bit more about that.
We'll change the microphone. Anyway, you have to answer. And the reality is that I have also been in Michelin restaurants for dinners or lunches, and I even had a chance to be apprenticee in a few. in France, and which was quite interesting that especially in France, Austria, or Germany, the food they serve, the style is very classical. It's very ancient, I would say. And in the same time, if you go to Scandinavia or some other part of the world, there is a lot of innovations in terms of food serving, in terms of the choosing the plates or the cutlery or even the table setup. And they do have, but the new ones they don't have. And that's sometimes strange, because in many new places, the food combination and presentation, or even the way of cooking, the technique, is more interesting and more innovative than in old places. And in old places, it's no doubt, in both places it's very tasty. That's the main thing. And but sometimes it sounds strange that these guys, because they have a castle, they have a 3 stars, and these guys, they don't have even 1. And they work like hell, and this is one of the questions. What do you think? Why is that? And the second question will be also about food bloggers, because the many people are very, very, how to say, deep in the food industry, especially to write it about, not to cook, but to write about. And which is strange and sad to my mind, they're anonymous. And they don't tell those names and something, and then they start to pour some bucket of shit on each other. And which, to my mind, it should be avoided, I think. But it will always be. It's the same with like TripAdvisor. But the first question, old and the new world.
Okay, so the 2 questions there. The first one was about, I guess, the new modern styles of presentation and so on. And what about combination with that with the older restaurants? I think both can be good. I mean, if you go to Spain, then obviously 10 years ago you had restaurants like El Bulli that was very influential before it closed, and they were clearly doing extremely modern things in the kitchen there. Probably sometimes too modern, yeah. But that clearly had a lot of influence on many different kitchens. Now in France, I mean, you do have a mixture, so you have restaurants like Amboise in Paris, which is very traditional, or Paul Bocuse in Lyon, and there, certainly at Bocuse, it is a little bit like eating in a museum of food, because you're eating the same dishes that were done in the 1970s. Yeah, and then that isn't necessarily a bad thing, though. If those dishes taste good, which they do, that isn't necessarily a problem. So you wouldn't really expect at Paul Bocuse to get a bunch of edible flowers tweezed onto the plate with a few ants, like you would get in Geranium or Noma. So I think there's a place for both classical food and modernist style food. And I think both are valid, Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But don't you think it should be kind of made it in categories?
Well, yeah, I suppose one of the drawbacks with the Michelin system, there are no words. You literally have an address and a star or not star. Okay, there's a little knife and fork symbol to give you a sense of how grand the restaurant is. But I mean, I suppose that's really where you, maybe coming on to your next question, to understand the style of cooking, that's the kind of thing that is covered in blogs, right? So, or newspaper, reviews or so on. And I think Michelin don't attempt to, judge whether something is, is being modern or classical. They just say, well, is it, in their opinion, is it good or is it bad? I mean, for a blogger or a journalist, of course they can write as much as they like or as much as they can fit on the newspaper column, about the style of the restaurant, which may be very, very different. It may be, highly innovative. It may use very modern kitchen techniques. It may have all kinds of unusual flavors and ingredient combinations, or it may be very traditional. But that's something you really have to look beyond Michelin for, because they really don't do that. They don't write anything. They just literally put, the address and the, and the details. In terms of, you wanted to ask about sort of what I think about bloggers, or
yeah, absolutely. Because the bad experience is
Right.
that, in general, the bad experience is that you read some anonymous blog with like no name, some references, and other people start to make a discussion about that, even without being there.
Yeah.
And
But I suppose, in a way, one of the big changes that's occurred is that 10 or 15 years ago, the only source of reviews of restaurants were really in newspapers and maybe some travel guides, I guess, and magazines, and these were all written by journalists. And so the difference, I suppose, is that the journalists were typically also have no background necessarily in the food industry. They're just writers, but they could at least write very well. That's one key thing. But there were very few of them. So even in somewhere like London, which is a big city, there is like one newspaper, the Evening Standard, and there's one. It's just there's one critic called Hayler. So if she 10 or 15 years ago, if she liked a restaurant, then gave it a good review, then it was going to be full the next night. And if she hated a restaurant, then it was going to be empty, basically. Now that's kind of very different now, because now you've got, in London alone, there are certainly hundreds actually of bloggers out there. But I think it's a little bit, with the blogging world, there is a sort of a Darwinian effect, because there is clearly a huge range of quality of blogs, both in terms of the writing style, in terms of the sort of the knowledge of the blogger, and basically, it's a free market. So people who people who show good knowledge and they write in an entertaining way will get a bigger audience. People who don't really know what they're doing and show, no real food knowledge, people will stop reading those blogs. So over time, you will get a survival of the fittest, essentially, in terms of the blogs, and the very best ones will get an audience that's of the same size probably as some of the newspaper critics, and the ones that are not very good will hardly anybody will read. I think it's actually quite a healthy thing, to be honest. It must be very annoying if you're a chef and you get a badly written TripAdvisor review or something, or a blog of someone who clearly doesn't know what they're talking about. And it must be very, very frustrating if you're working in the kitchen and that happens. But I guess it could also have happened that you would get a bad newspaper review. It's just that it didn't happen quite so often because there weren't that many newspapers. So you just have to, I think, as a chef or a restaurateur, I guess you just have to live with the fact now you are going to get a lot more feedback in terms of volume. It may not necessarily be high in terms of quality, but over time, what you hopefully will find is that the better bloggers, in terms of the ones who are more experienced and know a little bit about food and have eaten widely, they are the ones who will rise to the top, and get more audience. And the people who write, ignorant comments and they clearly don't know what they're talking about, over a time, people won't read their blog. I think it's, in general, I think it's a healthy thing because it gives people more choice about a restaurant. And certainly I can think in London, which obviously where I know the best, there was a restaurant about 10 years ago that opened, which was a French chef coming over from Lyon. And for whatever reason, the print critics really hated him. I think sometimes some of the London print critics can be a bit xenophobic. And he had terrible reviews. In fact, he was a 2 Michelin star chef from Lyon. He was an excellent chef. And it was interesting that the restaurant actually survived for quite a while because of a number of blogs. So a number of bloggers said, well, this is ridiculous, the food is excellent, and these print critics are idiots. And it was interesting that after initially the restaurant was empty, but after several influential bloggers started to regularly write about it, the restaurant got back on its feet. So it's easy to sort of assume that bloggers are all bad, but in fact it can be the other way too, that a restaurant can get sort of rescued, if you like, by good word of mouth and good coverage in blogs. So I think it's generally a positive thing, but I can understand why restaurateurs and chefs can get frustrated.
For you as a personality, just to tell us your top 3 things in general in all restaurants you have been visited, what you pay the most attention at, what brings you melting. In general, let's
sure.
say 2. I believe there is like 20. There's a plenty of things, but
sure. I can only speak from my own perspective, so I don't know what Michelin do. So I tried to. I was kind of trained as a restaurant inspector, a UK guide, a very long time ago, back in 1990, I guess. So before probably some of you were born. And so I'm obviously a little bit influenced by my own training. And what I was sort of taught to do was to focus on the food element rather than the service and decor. And the reason for that, because clearly for most customers, the service and the decor is at least as important as the food. But here's the thing. The service is an extremely personal experience. So if you might want a waiter to be very attentive and very, spend a lot of time with you, or you might want the waiter to just go away and let you chat to your partner, or the waiter might be very tired because it's the end of a service, and maybe a bit grumpy or whatever. That's going to vary a lot. The food shouldn't, I know it may do, but in principle the food should be very consistent from service to service. And so by concentrating on the food, you kind of you can write a review that is a bit more meaningful, hopefully, to other people. Because if you focus primarily on the service, it's going to vary so much in many restaurants anyway, that it's, the experience that you have one evening might be very different to the experience someone else gets the next evening, because they get a different waitress or a different waiter or a different time of the service. Whereas at least the food should be roughly the same. So from my own perspective, I don't score or write about. I just literally do not score the service whatsoever. It can be perfect or it can be terrible. It makes no difference to me. I only write about the food. I might mention the service if it's brilliant or if it's horrible, but I don't score it. And for me, as I mentioned in the discussion yesterday, I look for 4 things. So I look for ingredient quality, I look for presentation, so how pretty the plate is and so on. So that's where your edible flowers win, yeah? I look for the technical skill in the dish. So is it, is a scallop undercooked or overcooked or correctly cooked? Yeah, whatever it may be. And the 4th thing is what I would call the harmony of the ingredients. So in other words, if you have a dish of several elements, some flavors kind of go together better than others. And sometimes some chefs can put too many things on a plate. You end up with 6 or 7 components and flavors are clashing, And other times, the dish will hopefully have, 2 or 3 things that, naturally fit together well. So certain flavor combinations are very classical, like sea bass and fennel, or strawberries and cream or whatever. So the old joke is that strawberries and cream go together and lamb and raspberries don't. And so there's certain things where it is likely that for most people anyway, the combinations make more sense. So I just mentally tick off those 4 things when I'm looking at a dish. Is it designed well in terms of the combinations? Is the ingredient good? Is the scallop fresh or is it frozen? Is it a diver caught scallop or is it trawled? And you can, and if you're reasonably experienced, you should be able to tell that. And then does the plate look pretty? And have they overcooked or undercooked the thing, or they cooked it right? And I just do that, with every dish.
Okay, I will answer to the lady's question about the future restaurants. It's actually a very tough question. You probably can agree with me But I think the restaurants in the future will separate into two kind of restaurants. One will be the fast food, another will be like fine dining. I mean, not like fine dining, very fancy ingredients or fancy technique, but I mean the restaurants will be where will be the real people, and that will be like cheap food and quite expensive food because the real people will prepare this food. And I think in the future the restaurants will be more individual. They will be fighting for the place on the earth. I don't know how it is in London in English, but I think in Latvia especially because we are a small country, and we will have definitely fight for the customer. And actually that's the same what's happening with all the things in the world, that we are running, and if you want to be in the level, that's mean you will have to make a lot of hard work to be in top restaurants. You have to change plates, you have to change design, you have to be creative, you need to find new producers, you need the good stuff, and so and so. And I think that will be a future for the restaurants after 10 years. So there will be a fast food which is cheap, maybe frozen food, some robots, and there will be restaurants with real people, real stuff, and that will be expensive, but because you have to pay for the people's salary. And I'm not sure about the middle class. It's probably will be a middle class somewhere, but to answering to the question what lady asked, what will be the restaurants after 10 years? Yeah, once again, very individual, and that will be a big difference between restaurants. They will have to fight because the life is very, very fast, and I think that will be the same in the restaurants.
No,
So
especially in Latvia, I believe we really have to be and serve two kings, because we have to be good, nice, and tasty with the design, and I mean, as much we can, but and with the quality of food. Some of us we use more expensive ingredients because we can sell more expensive, and some of us we have to choose a bit more simple, but. In general, in the same time, we have to get the revenue and other things around. We have to, with other hand, we have to do, let's say, a big banquet and something else. And that means our focus is very spread. It's very, how to say, it has many directions in the same day. One day is like, of course, it's a dinner, and then it's a banquet.
Yeah, Kaspar.
What do you think? Where you will be after 10 years? Fast food or fine dining?
I will be in the same place, in the same spot, but my question is for you. What do you think about tasting menus? We have seen that it starts from 3 course, 4 course, 5 course, 7 course, 18 course, 27. How you might, what is your expectation for this?
Okay, certainly over the years there's been a change. 20, 25 years ago, you really had a starter and a main course and a dessert, and that was pretty much the same format everywhere. I think it was actually the influence from Japan, actually, which has caused there to be tasting menus to come up more, because the most traditional form of Japanese cuisine is called kaiseki, and that is a tasting menu of usually about 8 or 9 courses, small courses. And some of the French chefs like Jean Robuchon and others who were very influential, they opened up restaurants in Japan and started to think about whether they should adapt that style of cooking, and that kind of moved back to France and to other European countries. So I think it's sometimes it can be taken to extremes. I remember being at El Bulli and had 42 courses. I mean, there were little courses, but this is obviously a very long evening. So I think there will be trends. I think there will be there'll be a time when there'll be more tasting menus. There'll be a time when people get cross with that and they want to go back. I think one reason why tasting menus are popular at the moment is from a restaurant view, not from a customer point of view. From the restaurant point of view, you can see there'd be a lot less food waste if you give a no-choice tasting menu. So if you just say, I'm just going to cook these 8 courses, and you're all going to eat it, yeah, then you know exactly how much food to order. Whereas if you've got a particularly a lengthy a la carte menu, and you order a bunch of fish, whatever, and nobody orders the fish that night, you know, you're going to have a lot of food waste. So, I mean, I think it's very attractive from a chef viewpoint, because you can minimize sort of food waste. You know, some customers find tasting menu attractive because they like to try lots of little things, but others do not, you know. So, I mean, I don't really mind personally either way. I quite like trying different things. On the other hand, there are always certain ingredients that I personally tend to order. So I don't really mind either way, but some people actually hate having this kind of menu forced down their throats, as it were. And I think it's just a matter of how many customers will choose either way. But I think the economics of it will push the tasting menu, the no-choice tasting menu, and you can see that in a number of restaurants.
And I also know that in Scandinavia is at the moment is quite popular that they are not making tasting menus anymore, like 10 or 12 courses. They are going more to less courses, like 6, 7. You have a choice between 6 courses, 9 course, and then you can choose 4 courses. So they are not making very huge anymore. I don't know, probably it's because of the timing, and because people are, as we are running, and 12 course it takes 3 hours, so they try to make smaller, and like 5 course, 4 course, some compliments, some bush, and but they have to change. I think it's changing, should change, because if you have the same customers, so maybe you can change twice in a month or something.
How many courses will be in your menu tonight?
9. We have a lot of time.
All right, but in the same time, we have to ask the question to ourselves: is that we are conducting the guests, and do we play the music for them, or they tell us what to do, what a song they want to hear? And that's the big question, because we had all of us actually, we had a chance to be last year on the election of Massimo Bottura. And he's an amazing guy, and he described the guests perfectly. He said that there's a categories who are coming, the first category, who comes to Michelin, and they say that they want just surprise. They don't even look at the menu. Then the second category, they really choose the tasting menu. And on the third category, this is the guys who are taking an a la carte. And the guys who are taking a la carte, they normally always take the good wine, and actually they are the experts, and they are the persons who really can enjoy what they order. And because for guys who ask just for surprise, yes, they come to just spend a good time, have a good time, new experience, of course, many different tastes, and that's my point of view about the tasting menu.
From a purely selfish, personal point of view, if there are less courses, I have less that I have to write about. So I really hate 20-course tasting menus.
Okay, I have one question, very shortly. My first opinion about, I'm not sure about, is it true, but my opinion about the Michelin guide, you can be a very good restaurant here in Riga, wherever in a so small country, full of the people and so and so. But don't you think that the Michelin star restaurants are still looking on those chefs who has been worked in this range of restaurants? I mean, if I would work in a 3-star Michelin restaurant for 4 years, and then after France I'm coming back to Latvia, and then the critics are looking, hey, Māris are going back to Latvia, let's have a look what he will open. So I think it works a little bit like this. Is it true?
Again,
how you think?
It's speculation, but I think you're right.
Because you are going from this direction, and then it's easy to follow. It's so you have to go like this. You can be as good as you want here. A lot of
I mean, again, probably Michelin would, they just wouldn't explain or something. I think if I look at the London scene, where again I tend to know the chefs a bit better in terms of their careers, I think that is true. I think
it's logical, actually.
Chefs who have already got a star and open another restaurant will very frequently get a star in the next place, and maybe just because they're very good chefs. But there's also, Michelin have certainly got some kind of familiarity with those people, and they will follow them around a little bit. So, maybe it's just human nature that if they feel they were worth a star last time, well, maybe they should at least consider them for a star the next time. And I certainly, on the other hand, you do sometimes get brand new chefs. It's unusual. Obviously, most people follow a kind of regular career and they go to catering college and they train. But you do, there's an interesting restaurant in London called Hedonay, and that has a chef who's in his 40s, but he was a lawyer. He wasn't a chef, and he was a very, gifted amateur chef, but he had no training in restaurants. Now, when he opened up, I think he had a lot of difficulty because his main problem was he couldn't get any other chefs to work for him because they didn't know him. Yeah. When he got his Michelin star in the first year, which he did, he suddenly had a flood of CVs. So I think the Michelin thing can work, both ways. Actually, I think they in this case, Michelin did recognise the guy could cook, even though he had no background. But on the other hand, I think you're right that if you've already worked in 2- and 3-star places, you have a slight advantage. But it's speculation. Michelin will probably deny that, but I suspect it's
well,
true.
That's just on my opinion that it's easy to follow the chef from the Michelin star wherever he goes, and he opened his own restaurant, and it makes a sense. And it's very hard to make you very popular. So how they will know that you are deserving this star? So somebody told you, somebody suggests you, like very famous chefs or something. I think it's happening like this. That's mean we have to more concentrate to this kind of environment.
To take couple chefs from Michelin's, from Europe, to take some chefs from them. Then, right? I also wanted to ask a question about big restaurants and smaller restaurants. Yesterday you told a story about a 7-place restaurant, right? That was interesting. I think that in Latvia we will never earn money for 7-place restaurant, but that's really interesting story. So how it is in percentage approximately? Are they more smaller restaurants with Michelin stars, or they are also quite big restaurants, more than 100 places? Because we are, 3 of us at least, we are coming from quite big restaurants with caterings,
Kaspars, how many seats you have?
Caterings, etc.
90, 96.
Yeah, that's right, all of us. Yeah, and then we are making caterings and master classes and so much work. So it's probably harder to concentrate on everything, on the details.
I don't have statistics, but nonetheless, if I look around at places with stars, I think in France, many of the restaurants with stars will be between, let's say, 30 to 60 seats typically, and you would rarely see a restaurant with 100 seats. With more than 1 star. That isn't necessarily true. If I go to America, look at New York, then you have someone like Per Se in New York, which has 3 stars, and that has, I think, something like 140 covers. That's unusually big, but I think the economics of New York, because they've got astronomical rent costs and very heavy unionization, which means that labor costs are extremely high. It means you've got to get a lot of people through the restaurant to pay for the rent and all the extra staff you've got to hire. That same pressure isn't quite the same in some other countries. As for the place I mentioned yesterday in Japan, it's actually very common in Japan to see restaurants with 6, 8, 10, 12 seats. And honestly, I've asked many people how the economics of this work, and I'm absolutely baffled as to how any of these make any money. Some of them clearly, one of the things they do have an advantage of is that in Japan there is a very big, deep food culture, a bit like maybe like France, I guess, and a lot of people eat out, and a lot of people are prepared to spend a lot of money. So for example, somewhere like one of the top sushi restaurants could easily charge, let's say, €300, and people will fill that restaurant if the chef is good enough. Yeah. So maybe because they can charge a little bit more, they can have rather fewer covers, and going to get away with it. And I think talking to people who are dining out in Japan, they also said that there's a sense that in Japan people kind of expect the head chef to be cooking for them. It's not just to have the name over the door, but to actually to see the chef. Because in many of the Japanese restaurants, you're literally sitting at a counter and the chef is handing you the dishes. And so if they're paying all that money, they kind of want to see the chef there, not a junior. Yeah,
the personal touch.
Yeah, so it's a little. So I think it varies by country. Yeah, but I think in somewhere like France, to take a more, or Italy, then yeah, usually like 30 to 60 cover range is what's kind of normal for starred restaurants. And if you get these 150, 200 seat places, it's not impossible, but it's more difficult because you can imagine the consistency becomes an issue. But there are those exceptions. Yeah.
And we are very curious. You tasted some food in Latvia, so couple words. We really are curious. How do you like national or local products? Maybe some concrete examples what you tasted and what you liked and what you didn't like. Maybe some comments about that. Not about restaurants, maybe, but products, about tastes, about such things.
Okay, well, obviously my experience is quite limited because I've only been here a couple of days and I've only been here once before in Riga. So it's very difficult for me to make sweeping generalizations about the state of a cuisine based on, I think I've been to now 4 restaurants or something. So, obviously I will write up some experiences, next week about the places I have tried. I think it's been quite varied so far. So, I went to a restaurant last night called Vincent's, which actually I thought was extremely good. And one of the things I noticed there was that the ingredient quality was high. So the langoustines came out of a tank and they were alive. You can see the langoustine, you could pick it up, it was moving. Yeah. And maybe at 1 or 2 other restaurants I've been to, it's quite clear that the shellfish are dead. They're frozen and they're maybe trawled. Yeah. One thing that for me is a big deal is the sort of ingredient quality. So I think it's obviously possible to get high quality ingredients, but maybe some of the restaurants, like say Vincent's probably has got a big reputation, so they can afford to charge more, and therefore afford to import higher quality ingredients perhaps than some other restaurants. So I think one of the things I always look for in a place that's new to me, I guess, is the sort of the depth of food culture. I mean, if you take an example that's not Latvia, but if you go to the markets in a city, I find it very interesting. So if you go to the markets in Tokyo or Kyoto or somewhere like that, it's extremely interesting. So the fish market in Tokyo called Tsukiji. They sell 700 different species of fish. Now, I'm not sure if we could all collectively write down all the fish we've ever heard of. I don't think we would get to 700 between us, right? But that's what they sell. 14,000 people work in that market. So there's an enormous depth of quality and quantity, I guess, in this case, of fish, and chefs can choose from this massive range. Now, if you go to somewhere like around the Mediterranean, there are also some great markets. So if you go to somewhere like Cannes market, in the south of France, or just over the border in Ventimiglia, then you can, just by wandering around, you can see and smell the quality of the vegetables, which are extremely good there. If I do the same thing in England and go to the market, the quality is less good. So there's clearly in some countries there is a huge inherent advantage because there is a depth of quality that you can just find in all the markets. So I can wander around the market in Ventimiglia and I can just taste the peas out of a pod and I can just eat them raw and they're beautiful and sweet. And if I did that in England, I'd be spitting it out, So there's certain places have an advantage in terms of their supply chain, yeah. And obviously, if you open a restaurant there, you're going to have a much easier time than in a place where you can't get access to that kind of product.
Okay, then I have a question. So what about us? What about Latvia? We can talk all about Tokyo, Chicago, and New York, and so millions of people.
What is our advantage?
So what about us? So how we should survive, and maybe we should get some direction. I'm thinking about why we should put in a menu like tasting menus. Okay, 4 courses doesn't matter, because we are a small country, and we're thinking about food wasting, especially as such a small country as Latvia. So we're fighting for the customers. We should have definitely those tasting menus to not wasting the food. And so, what is direction about for us, such a small country? Do you have experience about?
Yeah, I'm not sure I've got
Or
experience.
we will find it after 10 years.
Well, I mean, I think one thing that is obviously possible is and you know, maybe one suggestion at least is to, you know, make the most advantage of the things that grow locally well. So, you know, I went to a restaurant yesterday where they seem to specialize in what they call sort of forest cuisine. So there was a lot of mushrooms. There were sort of, you know, animals from the woods, you know, and so on, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you're in a, you know, you should try to surely take advantage of what grows well locally. I mean, if you're in this climate, you're probably not going to have great tomatoes, you know, so you don't want to be focusing on your tomatoes because they're not going to be so good, you know. But I mean, if I think over to France, I mean, there's a restaurant called Regis Marcon, which is 3-star, and they're up on a kind of a hillside, and they have really terrible weather. It's really foggy and misty the whole time, but they, of course, grow fantastic mushrooms. So guess what? You know, Regis Marcon specialise in mushrooms, and dish after dish there have absolutely beautiful mushrooms. So, you know, I think taking advantage of what is good locally.
So you are suggesting this? I'm sorry, you're suggesting to found for us, I mean, fine dining restaurants mostly, this identity. So identity was to come to this country, not for the stars. Identity. Like this, yeah.
That's really what I mean. Yeah, and I think, you know, you should try to focus on the things that, you know, are maybe, you know, historical Latvian dishes that use, you know, ingredients which are, you know, are high quality here, whether that's animals or vegetables. You know, to me, because that's more interesting than going to somewhere which is just trying to reproduce, say, French dishes based on imported ingredients. And if you think about the rise of Scandinavian cuisine over the last few years in terms of its global recognition, I mean, that was very much the whole point about Noma, you know, which was all about, you know, taking pickled vegetables and you know, traditional local produce and trying to really make the most of that. And obviously they've got lovely, you know, shellfish and so on as well.
Which is very simple.
Yeah.
Just put the veg.
So it's easy, right?
Thank you.
Are there any fast food restaurants with Michelin star? Probably fast food restaurants, because we just with Māris and several people, we just went to the White Guide ceremonies. We got the White Guide for last year in Latvia. So we went to Stockholm and we heard the speech about the trend of the fast food, of the good quality fast food in last year. So are there such restaurants in the Michelin Guide already or no?
The only thing I'm aware of like that is, and I'm not necessarily sure it's a great idea, but the Michelin Hong Kong Guide, which I've got all kinds of problems with, they did actually sort of give a star to a very, very basic kind of dim sum place that I think is about 3 or 4 euros for the whole, you know, for a meal. Having said that, you know, I'm not sure that people necessarily think that place was really worthwhile. But there are 1 or 2 examples in the Singapore Guide. They've given a star to a hawker's stall, which is like in a shopping precinct, and it's like a noodle bar, you know. Now, I suspect, to be perfectly honest, that was a bit of a gimmick to try and sell the first guide and make headlines, you know. So whether they really should have done that is a debatable issue, but there are 1 or 2 examples.
So they're giving the choice of like hope for small restaurants like this.
With the small expenses, yeah. No.
It is interesting always for me what's happened with, let's say, Michelin restaurant, if the guests are coming and they suddenly don't use alcohol. Like, they don't like wine. Or they don't like champagne, or there is some other problems, or some... because to open a cork, to get some extra 500, that's another story, but to produce food which should be perfectly cooked, very mild, juicy and tasty, it's another thing. And if one of that part are just skipped, what's happened?
One thing that is probably worth being aware of is that as you're getting more Asian tourists coming to Europe, quite a few, not all, but quite a few Chinese people don't drink much alcohol. I mean, some do, but many do not. And so one of the things which some of the sort of multi-starred restaurants do now is, as well as offering a wine pairing with the menu, they offer a juice pairing. Yeah. Yeah, because they sort of really have to do that because they still want to make some profit, but recognizing that a proportion of their customers, really don't drink very much or maybe nothing at all. So that's the kind of adaptation which you may need to adapt if you get more Asian customers, for example.
That was like a more business question, revenue question.
Yeah, I have a small question. What is your best restaurant in the world to return again and again?
Although there's lots of places I like, the actual place I'm particularly fond of, I'm not saying it's the best, but it's my favorite, is this restaurant in the southwest of France with this chef Michel Guérard. So it's called Près des Eugénies. It's in a tiny little village. It's sort of south of Bordeaux and west of Toulouse. And he has had 3 Michelin stars for 40 years. He's 83 years old, and he's always in the kitchen. And I went there in the last year, I think, five times. He was always in the kitchen every day. You have a few rooms on the property, and just to give you a story about this gentleman, not last year, but a couple of years before, I was just staying in the room overnight, and I was going to have lunch, and there was a knock on the door, and I thought it was the housekeeping, and it was actually Michel Guérard, and I've never actually met him. I'd seen him, but I'd never spoken to him. And he said, I said, hello, wasn't expecting you to knock on my door. And he said, yeah, he said, basically, I have an apology to make. He said, I'm always in my kitchen, but tonight I cannot be because I have to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award from the President of France in Paris. So I have to travel to Paris. So I'm going around to all the rooms on the property to personally apologize to my guests for not being in the kitchen. Now, this is a guy with 3 Michelin stars for decades, right? I found that very impressive.
It is. I think it's a little bit. It sounds crazy, of course, but last year when we were in Estonia, the Magnus Nilsson from Faviken, he said the chef shouldn't be all the time on a place. So chef should travel and get experience, and the experience is coming mostly for traveling and see around. That's I like to hear that, and I also like to hear that what you are saying. So, well,
Where is the way out?
What about the superstars then?
What?
Like Gordon and other guys?
It's indifferent.
TV
Like.
superstars, yeah.
Yeah, well, but the restaurants have those name under, and the one is, of course, you can sign up. You can put your signature there, and probably, and I believe so, that they have the best stuff ever and the best sous chefs and chefs in general who runs the restaurants. But to put your name and to film some Hell's Kitchen in some jungle, that's yeah. How is with them?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you can see that running a kitchen is a very wafer thin margin operation. So you can see that Gordon Ramsay made lots of money, not because his restaurants are highly profitable, but because he makes money from television and from advertising and books and so on, and sponsorship. So you can understand his personal motivation as to why he would do that. From a customer at the restaurant perspective, you'd probably rather the head chef was in the kitchen rather than going off doing some marketing. I do notice there's a big variation by country here. So in the UK, there's a huge tendency, or at least I find, for some younger chefs to open the restaurant and then immediately want to do a cookery book and try and get on TV. And the number of times when I've asked, is the head chef in? And in London, it's so often, oh no, he's doing a private function, or he's doing a marketing event, or he's doing an interview. But if I ask the question in Switzerland or France, is the head chef in? They look at me as if I'm mad. Because they say, well, where else would he be? Of course he's in the kitchen. And if you look at maybe one of the best restaurants in the world, called Hotel de Vie in Crissier, it's quite interesting. They actually, the head chefs there, of course they need a holiday, right? But what they do is all the staff take holiday at the same time. So they literally close the restaurant for several weeks, and they all take holiday at the same time, and then they are all together. And the reason they do that, and I've been told this, by the head chef, is that he said this way, the customer will never get an off night. We are always, the same team, always. We've never got the B team, We've always got the A team, And so, of course, it's a matter of opinion. If you could have a perfect team, and of course, they're suffering financially because of that, because they're closing the restaurant, right? Now, maybe that's not possible in some locations and some other situations. But if you're a customer, which would you rather have? Would you rather have the head chef and everyone working there, or would you rather have a junior?
If you do expect Michael Jackson, then you want to see him. The one thing is put the DVD on, but which everybody can do. But yeah, you answer basically the question, and it's amazing that the guys from that restaurant can afford it, and they have enough of to take a vacation.
Kaspar, you have questions?
When is your vacation?
You look strange tonight.
Just ask it. I'm sleeping.
Just ask it.
Okay. Thank you for so many questions and so many answers. But I feel still one question of mine. It's when you choose a menu, first things what you looking at. You read down the menu, how many items is in the starters, main courses, desserts. What is your opinion?
Okay. Well, I suppose, one thing is certainly looking at the length of the menu is interesting. I think you always worry if the a la carte menu is enormous. So if you've got 20 starters and 20 main courses, you kind of suspect that everything may not be perfect in the kitchen, because it must be very difficult for a kitchen to produce all of those optimally. It's often what you find with, say, like a Chinese restaurant, you get 50, seafood dishes where
it's the same sauce.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the size of the menu is relevant, and maybe you want some choice though. You don't want just one thing, because So once you've looked at that, I guess I tend to enjoy certain ingredients more than others. We're all human, right? We all have some preferences. So I will tend to look down and try to find things that I'm familiar with. And it's partly maybe because I'm a bit of unadventurous. So if I find my beloved langoustines, then I'm probably going to order a langoustine dish. And it's partly because I like langoustines, but it's also partly because I know exactly what it's supposed to taste like. So in other words, if I've had so many dishes around the world with that ingredient, that I've got a very, very good idea as to what it's supposed to be like. And so from a writing perspective, I can kind of gauge where it fits much more easily. Whereas if I have something that I've never eaten in my life, so I had, in Japan a while back, I had cold squid intestines. Now, I've never had that before, so I could sort of say whether I kind of enjoyed it or not, but I didn't really have a benchmark for it, So from my viewpoint, it's not just about the meal, but also I've got to write about it. So it's helpful to me if I can find things that I'm reasonably familiar with, either in terms of dishes or ingredients that I've had before, because then I can more accurately sort of benchmark them. But of course, it's interesting to try new things, but I'll probably write a better review if I know what it's supposed to taste like.
Maybe somebody from the people want to ask something. I just ask, Nobody has a question? No? It's okay.
We can also translate, right?
Translate?
Yeah, translate, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, one question.
Yeah, thanks. Lately we saw in Latvia especially that restaurants are going outside of the city, being in the countryside and so on. And how do you see that tendency in the world? Let's say, is it developing still? I know that in France particularly there are many restaurants that are outside of Paris and Nice and so on, but how is that going?
I will answer for the first part and then you can answer the second part. For the first part, what's happening in Latvia at the moment, you can see that last 3 years, slowly, one by one, we have some restaurants, kind of restaurant. They are good as they are in the countryside. And this movement already started 4 years ago in Estonia, and it's also happening the same with us. So now we see some couple of restaurants slowly outside from the Riga. It's a little bit difficult because of the people. So the people are concentrated in Riga, and that's why we are used to eat in good restaurants in Riga. But I see the movement that in cities like Liepāja, like Cēsis, like Ogre, Jelgava are getting one by one good restaurants. How it's happening in England, I think it's already 100 years old traditions, right?
Plenty of good restaurants.
Yeah, outside from all around the country, because you don't have only one London, like you have rich people even outside from London.
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, UK is a bigger country, so it is true. There is, yeah.
Globally, people try to go most to the cities. Globally.
Sure. But there are certainly, there are some advantages of a country location. I mean, certainly if you look at, say, France or Germany, then, so take Germany, all of the 3-star restaurants are actually in the country. There's not one 3-star restaurant in Berlin. There is one now in Hamburg, okay, but that only just moved recently. But most of them are in the country, and I think the advantage is that they can obviously have bigger premises and so on,
Surroundings.
Nice surroundings, all that kind of stuff. But especially they don't have the pressure of city centre rents, So that gives them more space. Costs are lower, And as long as they can attract enough people, that's the difficulty, yeah. But as long as they can build up the reputation and attract enough people, then you can see that there could be some advantages to that.
But is it big fun actually to go out from the city, from the center, and this is a kind of a journey, like a culinary journey. You go, you see the nature around, and then of course you go to some particular place, maybe stop in between for some coffee, and even if it takes an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and then you go back, and this is a part of experience, and then the nature, how to say, the nature is very important, yeah, in that, and all surroundings, as I said, is even if it's castle or the old barn, or
the biggest example is the Faviken.
Yeah,
So
it's a nowhere.
It's fucking nowhere,
Yeah.
It's absolutely in 600 kilometers from the center, but somehow he made it.
Yeah,
So-
but now it's a story about. But okay, let's see what's happened.
I think it
Any
helps
more
if
questions?
you've got a billionaire owner, I think.
Yeah, sure.
So maybe somebody else? Any questions? Jautājumi?
How much we have time?
I think we already...
We have more 20 minutes, yeah? Okay. You have a question?
Just we need to talk more slow, and that's it. And, we do very fast.
So this is the total globalizations, probably polarizations. What is going on? It's in the restaurant business as well. But you are talking about the service you are providing to the customers. What changes have been done during the last years inside the kitchen, inside the restaurants, and how do you see will be changes in the future? If there is some changes, I'm not talking about technique. I'm talking about the organization as a restaurant, as a business unit.
Well, it's a tough question. Normally, if you look at the biggest cities, not Riga, but I think Scandinavian country. That's only my opinion. We still have in Latvia this in a lot of restaurants 2-shift. People working in 2 shifts, and so chefs still working in 50 days. So 50 days working, 50 days off. As I know, and Kaspars knows well, and he has been a lot of restaurants outside that people in other countries, chefs in other countries don't work 50 days. They work 20 days and then 10 off. That's mean 6 through 1 or 5 through 2, and 5 working days, 2 days off. And that's the question. That's only the question when we will go this kind of system, because expenses what we have at the moment for the 2 shift of the chefs is too high. If we look at the people, how much can come to the restaurants, expenses, rent expenses, and chef expenses is too high. That's mean we will definitely have a choice and to do this to make 1 shift. That's mean we should have close the restaurant for the 2 days, for example, Monday and Tuesday, and then that will save a lot of restaurants. I know that Mārtiņš is already doing this, so he's the first in Latvia. I see it's very successful, and that's I think will change a lot of in restaurant life in not all of the restaurants, but. The fine dining restaurants should change somehow because it's too expensive. At the moment, it's too expensive to keep the 2 shifts in Latvia. And this is how it works. A lot of restaurants
That's good you mentioned the Monday and Tuesday day off. Normally it's like Sunday.
We are chefs.
Sunday and Monday. But in our places the Saturday and Sunday is quite popular because the people at least they go out, and of course the Friday evening, maybe Thursday evening, but sometimes the Monday evening is even more better than Wednesday evening.
But it's sometimes.
And this is like you never know. But this is a dream what you talk about.
It's all about optimization.
About the one shift, and the 8 hours, forget it. But let's say 12 hours
40
per day. 40, it's too much. But 12, it's okay if you are very efficient. And but we can't do it. We can't close the restaurant in Mondays and Tuesdays. We can't close the restaurant in the same days because it will be nowhere to go. We are like 20, 30 restaurants where the people are like going more than to other restaurants, and we can't close it in the same time. And I'll choose the Wednesday and Thursday, and we have to. Mārtiņš has a question.
Yeah.
Hello
Chef,
again.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. To see you also nice. The main talk here is supposed to be Michelin, how to get a Michelin star. Yeah, not how to make lots of money, I think. Yeah. Now wait a minute. Let me finish. And this is I think why Andy's been invited here. How to get a Michelin star, and talking about hours. Talking labor wages, rents and that, you have to make a decision what you want to do. You want to make lots of money, to have a big turnover, or do you really want to put something on the plate that people will travel miles for? And I think one fantastic example right now is Sat Baines in Nottingham. He is looking after his staff, number one, and they're working 4 days a week. And he's getting up there. And this is the love that you want to put on the plate and concentrate on that and not run around seven days a week, morning, noon, and night, making lots of receptions, banquets, and so we have to decide what we want to do. One thing or the other, but you can't do everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, the Martin is absolutely right. Yeah, you are right. And this is what we talk internally, always between each other. And but it is so painful thing. And because in the same time, of course, you have to do about your things you mentioned before. And the 4 days, of course, you can concentrate and get your, let's say, your restaurant full for that 4 days. Then that's much more better than the half empty for the 7 days, which is, yeah, again. And I will not mention anymore the costs and everything. And I'm sorry, and hours. And, I'm sorry. No, it's fine. But how to get a Michelin? In general, the question. Because as you mentioned, actually in one of your answers, you visited yesterday the restaurant Vincent's, and we believe so that that is the place who could get the star. It's not because we know Martin or because some part of us we have been there for a while, but the question is that why we are not that
How can we help?
Interesting. How can we help exactly? And let's say we can read it in internet, the San Pellegrino guide, the top of San Pellegrino, which is to my mind quite interesting. Well, maybe I'm not agree with everything, but it's quite interesting. And there's a lot of let's say not a lot, but different other guides, and but somebody run this guide. And is the Michelin runs that guide like the Michelin? Or somebody still from the country have to come and say, please come?
Are you asking about the San Pellegrino specifically? I mean, I know a little bit about that. I mean, that's more publicly understood, I guess, the way it works. So for those less familiar with it, the guy, it's actually, I think it's technically not called San Pellegrino anymore because they're no longer sponsoring it, but it was originally this sort of top 50, as they call it, which is actually stretched now to the top 100, but they still call it the top 50. It came out in 2002, I think, was the first one, and it came out of quite a small UK restaurant magazine called Restaurant, and it was a trade magazine, and they just did this as a one-off exercise just for one issue, and they sort of just had a little brainstorming after some boozy lunch or something, you know, and they said, oh, why don't we come up with the top 50 restaurants in the world? Now the thing is, most of these guys had never been anywhere else, so they didn't really know. So the first list was kind of laughable because it was all these like UK restaurants, which are, you know, clearly not at all world class necessarily. But basically it turned out that newspapers really like lists. And so even though the list was incredibly bad, it got huge amounts of publicity. And after that, it gained sponsors. And then they started to put in place a more structured system. So what they've done is they've divided the world into various sectors, and so some of the sectors are like France, or US, or maybe the parts of Asia or the Baltics, for example, and they've sort of tried to allocate sort of weightings to these different areas, and then within each sector there is a bunch of judges. And these are appointed by a country chair. So, for example, somebody in the UK, let's say, is the country chair. It's a lady called Xanthi Clay. She appoints a bunch of people that she knows, and it's basically 1/3 chefs, 1/3 journalists, and 1/3 international diners, basically. And these people vote once a year. They have 7 votes, and they have to cast at least 3 of those votes outside of their own country. And then they just add up all the scores. Now, the thing that's interesting about San Pellegrino is, as it's more correctly called the top 50, is that the commercial effect of being on that top 50 or even the top 100 is actually very significant. So these days, if you can be like number 49 on that list, it's probably more important than gaining a Michelin star. There are people who just sort of travel around the world just to sort of try and tick off these places on the top 50. So now that particular list does have one big advantage from your viewpoint, in that it's global. So because there are no inspectors, there's no sort of permanent inspectors, there is no limitation as there is with Michelin, where, you know, say if you're a great chef in Australia or in Estonia, you're screwed because you can't be in the Michelin, right? But if you're a great chef in Australia, you can be on the top 50 list. So there's a restaurant in Melbourne called Attica, and that, you know, is on the top 50 list. Yeah.
It's not Michelin.
No, it's not Michelin. But it's on the top 50. And what I'm saying is that top 50 list is maybe sort of worth your chefs kind of thinking about, because they're you know, they do attempt to make this representative of all the different areas. And you know, and there is no blacklist of countries, you know, so there's no reason in theory, you know, why a restaurant from the Baltics could not appear on that list. There is none, and there certainly are. I mean, somewhere like Fäviken is quite high on that list, for example, even though it's obviously a very long way away from anywhere. And Fäviken, I mean, until 2 years ago, Michelin didn't cover Scandinavia outside of the cities. So Fäviken was on that list, but it had no stars. I mean, it does have now, but it didn't at the time. So the list like that, and I guess you have this thing called the White Guide in Scandinavia, which I'm not that familiar with, but I've looked it up, but I don't know much about its mechanisms. You know, these other guides are also additional ways that you can potentially popularize the restaurants of the Baltic states, you know, outside of just the local audience, because I'm sure the people in Riga know about which restaurants are good here, but for visitors it's less obvious. Yeah.
Talking about the top 50 and exactly what you were saying, and Michelin. Now, what does surprise me, that René from Norma, he was number 1 in the world 5 times, but never did get 3 stars. And I'm confounded why he hasn't had 3 stars, why Michelin has not respected what he has achieved in this world, why only the 2 stars, and of course Garenium 3 stars, which is also at the top there.
He's doing creme brulee without egg. Or no tablecloths.
If we can,
yeah, I mean, you'd have to ask the Michelin inspectors. I mean, you know,
How do you think? Why is that?
Because they don't believe that the food is worth 3 stars. I mean, in their opinion. I mean, if they did, they'd give it 3 stars. You know, I mean, it's clearly. I mean, we all would have potentially disagreements with individual ratings of the Michelin. I mean, like I say, I've got this huge problem with the Michelin Hong Kong guide, where there's lots of restaurants that I think are just bad or just wrong, you know. And you've got a problem here with Noma, and you know, restaurant criticism is not a science, you know. You know, so you have these systems and structures like San Pellegrino, like the Michelin, and you know, we're never going to agree, right? All of us on exactly which one's first, you know. You know, it's you know, it's not a science, you know. I mean, something like but they are useful exercises in promoting the general restaurant industry, because a lot of people, I mean, even if you disagree about the order on the San Pellegrino, which I certainly do, nonetheless, it gets people talking about those 50 or those 100 restaurants. And a whole bunch of people have eaten at restaurants that would never have eaten at those places before, because they're interested and they read about them and they get excited about it and they want to travel to a top 50 or a top 100 restaurant. In the same way that, you know, people get excited about, I want to go to a 2-star or a 3-star Michelin restaurant. So these alternative lists, I think, have got a lot of promise, if you like, for restaurants, because they're just another way of promoting, the industry, in particular for international travellers. And in the case of the Baltic states, obviously, Michelin is it's a bit of an annoying thing because they don't cover you, but the White Guide does and the San Pellegrino does. So it may be worth spending some time thinking about how best to engage with those alternative lists, because they can promote travel just as well as Michelin can.
Okay, thank you. Martin, something more to ask?
Can I? Lauris, you have mentioned that there is a point of view that if restaurants should follow to the guests, or restaurants should create the guests and create the taste of the guests.
Yeah.
Not yours, you have mentioned it, that there was some discussion. We are talking today how will be the difference between yesterday restaurant and today restaurants, or tomorrow restaurants. According to the figures in Europe, food consumption, eating out habit is growing. And in general, in Europe, it's about 18% of the food, total consumption going on out of home. In Latvia, it's much less. And what is going on in the market, more and more people like to spend time out of the home and eating out of the home, getting this experience. So please don't be fast going only to the fine dining or to the fast food, because I'm saying just on behalf from the citizens of the country. We don't want to eat everyday fast food, and we are not able to eat everyday fine food. So how do you see, and what is your prognosis? What is the changes of the taste of your guests here, our citizens in Latvia? What can be changes of flavors or habits, what you are mentioning, and see how this demand is changing?
Because of our guests, I have been traveled around the world 10 times, not being there, because of those experience. And many of my knowledges in general, or of our knowledges, it came from the guests who we personally know and who we got to know during the years we make food for them. And this is always interesting to go into the discussion, to slide into the discussion about what's happening in New York or what's new in Tokyo or New Zealand without even being there. But I know some few new things what's happened there, because my guest has been there. And what do they expect? I believe they really still looking and will look for the good quality of product, for absolutely simple fish, easy made. Well, not easy like easy, but simply made without any crazy techniques, but to keeping the taste. Yeah, understandable. To keep the taste, to keep the flavor, of course, the structure. And about the garnishes, the vegetarian part is taking a bigger and bigger part in especially the garnish part, or the vegetarian as a main course, as a main dish. And it's taking, before it was like 5%, now it's like 15%. And people are, well, you can't create a new turbot fish or cebus. It still exists, but you can create different broccoli or different taste. You can give a different taste to broccoli or technique how to make it. And I believe so. This is a close future. It's not a far future. It's a close future. But of course, the good restaurants will always be, and the fast food also will be. But I really hope that we will not go the old Europe way to serve potato salad from the bucket and say that it's tasty, or over salted goulash soup. in I will not tell where, but you know the places. And I really hope, because in Latvia we still do everything by hand, and we still boil the soup from the bones, and which is still good. That's the answer, I believe.
Thank you.
Actually, you asked a very, very tough question. That's only my opinion. So people who lives in this country, they really know this culture, what is about our country, where we've been 50 years ago, what was happening when we became independent. I know the Martin saw that very well, what was here 25 years ago and where we are now. So it's a completely different country. But still we have such a hard traditions to, especially in the countrysides. In normal people at home still eat different food, like in fine dining. Which is the best direction? I don't know. We will have still those historical ingredients, recipes from Soviet times, whatever. But as I know, we chefs, we directly get this line for the competitor Latvian cuisine. So we want to pick up the vegetables, we want to pick up all the mushrooms and make new traditions, new dishes, new everything new, because it's very hard to answer to your question, which direction we are going. Because at the moment we have a little bit from Soviet times, we have a European kitchen, and we have this new Latvian kitchen. So which direction we are slowly going, that will be, after 10 years we will see. We will see. Yeah.
We don't know.
You never know.
I'll take off after 10 years.
Yeah, but anyway, if we talk about the new Latvian kitchen, which is based on ingredients, local ingredients, we all together chefs, we made huge job. If you look at 10 years ago, I said before that the beetroot was not so popular as it's now. So we eat beetroot at home, like in simple salads. So now beetroot in fine dining restaurant is something wow, especially if you get it from some farmer or something. That's mean this local consumption, local identity. We are slowly. We are putting the code to our citizens, to our people, that because if you remember when we came in European Union, all what was coming from other countries was wow, like shrimps, avocado, pineapple, and so on. So we forgot about all our ingredients. And now we are slowly, chefs are putting back this code to the people. And thanks God we are eating very healthy at the moment, I think, because there is no place for the fast food, there is no business. No. And as Lauris said, we still make food at home, which is better than you eat it in fast food. Yeah. I don't know did I answer to your question, because this question is very long, so we have to go. Take a coffee.
I think that was a very motivative speech, and we have to go and work and eat, right?
So that's me. We are finishing, or what?
I think that yeah.
Okay,
this,
I have an applause.
Very positive note. Yeah.
Thank you.
And Andy, thank you very much for coming. I hope it will be not the last time, and next time you will come and give us the star, right?
Thank you everyone for listening, for asking questions, and thanks everyone involved in this discussion. I hope the discussion will continue today, tomorrow, and every day. Thank you.